Technology has taken over the workplace. People are now picking up new skills that they can adapt to their careers and work remotely. Today on the show, we'll be looking at remote work, the ethics of it, and how we can balance it with our life and our faith. When we come back from this short break, we'll be meeting our guests and going straight into the discussion. My name is Chima. Welcome to Catholic Faith Forum. Welcome back to Catholic Faith Forum. Today I have with me in the studio JoseMaria Agulanna, the CEO and co-founder of My Invest, CTO and co-founder. Awesome. He is going to be talking about remote work, and we'll be looking at the ethics of it and how we can balance it with our life and our faith. JoseMaria, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming back to our set. You see that we are looking
very nice.
All right, so basically, let's just go straight into the crux of the matter. What does it mean to work remotely?
So working remotely basically means that you're working from home. You're not in a conventional office space that allows you to, meet other people. You're basically working from your bedroom, something like that.
Awesome. So because people are now adapting to this lifestyle, seeing how the pandemic forced it upon us, do you think in the nearest future it will make physical office go extinct?
I think it will affect the physical offices, but not exactly go extinct. There's some level of professions that allow people to work remotely, such as the technology space where you have developers obviously work remotely all the time. And that has been the prevalence close to 2 years now in Nigeria. But allowing the whole workforce to work remotely might take longer than expected. Yeah.
It may be weird too to think that as a TV person, I will be shooting this from my bedroom.
Exactly.
It sounds nice, but I don't think it will give the same feel as when I'm in the studio. Yes.
So what we're probably going to see going forward is probably a hybrid kind of arrangement whereby some certain levels of the human resource aspects will be working remotely, while some core aspects might actually be in the office. So certain aspects that we notice that can work remotely could be in the finance, the admin, the aspect of maybe technology. If you have a tech person that codes, that aspect can actually work remotely. But other aspects can actually be informed. They have to be in the office.
Yeah, you can't expect your banker to tell you I'm at home, send me.
Definitely.
All right, so when it comes to working remotely, for many offices, the burden usually lies on the employees, to set up themselves, to get their computers and their work desks ready and all of that. So how can employers make it easy for employees?
So in My Invest, we started working remotely back in March 2020. And it was a very difficult process for us because we've never practiced it. Unlike the advanced countries, some companies have actually practiced this way before the 2020 pandemic. But what we noticed was that people were stressed because they were working probably 24/7 of the time. And we had to see how we could balance in such a way that people were not totally choked with work. What we noticed at the end was that in the office spaces, usually people work for 9 to 5, people work around 4 hours within that period.
No, that's how it is everywhere.
But when at home, they work more than 4 hours. They work close to 6 to 7 hours. And we noticed that that was choking them and they were not exactly being productive. So what we did was to make sure that we have certain meetings within the week that allows us to check on our employees. We also had to assign someone to someone else. So someone doesn't have to be working and you might lose focus eventually. So we assign someone to someone else to check up on you maybe every 2 hours or maybe based on the tasks you have on that particular day. So maybe if you have a certain task to finish up in 2 days, you have someone that is basically poking you and telling you, okay, you have something to do.
Like an accountability partner.
Exactly. So that's what we did. And it has been working so well. Based on from March till, that's basically a year now, we've seen a level of productivity from everyone. We noticed that there are some things you can actually discuss remotely. Some things like brainstorming, you have to actually come together.
Have everybody.
So what we did was sometimes they even came to my house to do it, or we had to go to the office. So there are times that you have to actually meet together and talk, but remotely in a certain way, there's a level of efficiency that it brings to the workforce that we
Awesome.
like.
So basically, employers have to be deliberate about their employee welfare,
Yeah.
and it will help them to work better remotely.
Yeah, and we noticed that we had to give some level of incentives. So data allowance, fuel allowance, those kind of things are very important. And finally, we noticed that even reduced the cost of the operations.
In the office.
Money that we're meant to put in the office and pay all of those things, we just diverted it to the employees. I said, okay, your data allowance, you're going to settle it. If you're a technology or a coder or a programmer, we are going to pay for your gen because you need gen to continue working.
Yeah.
So those kind of incentives will actually help people to be more productive.
Okay, so let's talk about you now. When MyInvest made the decision to move remotely, how did you, as one of the founders of MyInvest, how did you make the transition yourself?
So I always wanted to work remotely. Funny enough, when we first time we went into the office, I think 2019, it was a bit choking because that was the first. We didn't have a product then, and I always said that this whole thing is stressful, going to the office, coming back, and I just wanted a bit of flexibility. So I was very, very happy when that happened because it was like an excuse to see how working remotely would look like. From our end, I think the founders found it very difficult because you're basically, how will I put it, you're basically handling everyone. And you're placed with the responsibility to make sure that everyone is on check.
To do their work, yeah.
And it just doubles the workload you have automatically. So throughout that period, I was extremely stressed. And we just had to take a conscious decision to stop working on Saturdays because we usually work on Saturdays. We're like, okay, founders, you guys need to rest on Saturdays, no working. But we noticed that a lot of workload was basically transferred to the co-founders because we had to check up on every single one to make sure that the team is really tight during that period.
Awesome. Well, we're going to continue this conversation, but first we'll have to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll look at a very interesting opinion that we got on social media and we'll discuss it. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. I still have with me JoseMaria, the co-founder of MyInvest, and we're talking about remote work. We have a very interesting opinion that we got on our social media concerning this topic. Sage Ike on Twitter tweeted at us, the average Nigerian boss feels that out of sight means no work done, and even when productivity increases due to remote work, it will take something profound to make this an actual possibility in the future. Another factor is our analog way of work. What do you think of this person's response?
I think he's very correct. So there is this certain level of, so there are two different kinds of bosses. So in the tech space, we get to see that some bosses are much more freer with their employees. They're much more open to things. But in the other, maybe let's say if you're working in a manufacturing firm or you're working in a conventional office, you're probably not going to see that kind of foresight or free boss. So I think it's very prevalent in our society that most bosses would want you to be in the office. They derive that joy to make sure that, oh, you're here. Thank you very much for coming to the office. And you're doing the work and they want to see you doing the work, even though most times they don't actually doing the work. They're actually doing the work. And what we notice is that we usually watch the employees and we notice that sometimes they're just pressing their phone. They're literally not doing anything. And that level of, how will I put it, relaxation can actually be used for something else. They could be resting. They could be doing something else productive. But because they're in the office and maybe they've done everything they're meant to do, they're just sitting down and wasting space. You get? So most times I think there's a level of education that has to be introduced to all these bosses to let them know that, see, your employees are not actually working 9 to 5. They're just working 6 hours or 4 hours within that period. So if you can let go of some people, you're going to save a lot of cost because in their mind, they're always thinking of, oh, how do I reduce costs and increase my revenue? So if you speak to them in that language and say, okay, if you're going to allow people to stay at home, maybe you have to reduce some operational costs. And that helps you in doing a lot of things. You can take a look from companies like Facebook and Google. They actually tell people that, okay, you're free to leave the company, and you're free to go work in a different city altogether. But here's what you're going to do. We're going to reduce your salary by 10%, right? And we are going to give you some incentives. So they gave their employees like $2,000 to start off their home office in their house. So those kind of incentives reduced a lot of cost for Facebook, and also created like an incentive for the employees to actually do whatever they want and still become productive later on. So I think a level of orientation has to start from those bosses.
Yeah.
That's basically what's
Awesome. Thank you for that insightful opinion. We'll be going on another short break now. When we come back, we'll be looking at how we can balance remote work, our lives, and our faith. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking remote work, and now we want to look at how we can balance it with our lives and our faith, because some people actually don't have a life again because they are now working remotely. There's a saying now that you are not working from home, you are living at work or something like that. So a lot of people, since the whole remote work thing started, people now work late into the night. Some people have overnight and spend the whole night working, and they don't have any time to rest, even when they are literally on their bed doing whatever they are doing. So how are you able to have a life, seeing that you are actually a founder of a platform?
So I think it boils down to the underlying factor why fully working remotely is going to be very stressful for a lot of people. And that's why I mentioned the hybrid system. So we notice that and that's something that is very difficult to grasp, but if you're working remotely, you're more likely to work more hours and you're more likely to be stressed. And we couldn't do anything about that. What we had to do was to say, okay, some days in a week, we are seriously focused on those days. So Mondays meetings, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and maybe Thursday and Friday are not so chunked up. And you allow people to actually do things for themselves. And if you're doing that, because they're working more hours at work, they're concentrated on those Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, they're actually much more productive in the week because they have certain tasks to finish by Wednesday. So that's something that we try to incorporate in MyInvest to see how people can actually work around it. But going further, maybe after the pandemic and everything, we're trying to see how people can try and mix it up a bit. So we noticed that if you're working, you're probably going to be stressed so much at home. So try as much as possible to come to the office. Try and mingle with people, get that insight. Then maybe not all the time you should be in the office. We could try and see how we can say Monday, Tuesday, be in the office. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can stay at home.
So basically, the hybrid system will actually help people have a life outside remote work.
Because you're probably not going to have a life. I've noticed that. And it's going to be very difficult to navigate through.
And eventually, your productivity will drop because when you find yourself just working, you become a drone. You're not doing anything.
I have a neighbor that is in a customer service unit, and she works from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Constantly, every single day.
Every single day. Wow.
And eventually, she falls sick all the time. So that's something that, if you look at those things, the days that she's falling sick, she might take a week off. And what's happening during the week for that business? You're going to be losing a lot of things. So try as much as possible to create that system that allows a little bit of flexibility. If you're doing a hybrid system, make sure that, okay, they're coming a few days in a week and the rest of the week, if you look at it statistically, they're going to be more productive. And that's something that we try to incorporate in MyInvest.
Awesome. So what do you think is actually the biggest challenge for employees when it comes to remote work?
I think it's... how will I put it? Number one is lack of, will I say, interaction. So I've noticed that human beings are generally...
We are social
beings, and we need some level of interaction. We need to go out, we need to talk, we need to speak to people. And one of the things our HR did was she always had to do this early morning routine checkups with us to make sure that, oh, you're still breathing. Hope you're waking up. Sometimes you wake up. So sometimes we'll be sleeping till like 9 a.m. and she just wake up and say, JoseMaria, wake up in the morning. Hope you're doing well. How are you doing? And those kind of interactions help other people to feel at home and feel among during that period. But we noticed that there still needs to be that certain level of collaboration. We did a brainstorming session early on this year, and we were so joyful to see each other for the first time. And that is something that we need going forward. So I think there's a level of balance we have to bring to the table on that aspect.
Okay, so how about your faith now? Since you started working remotely, how has it been? Do you find yourself going to church more? Do you find yourself praying more? Because I'm assuming, maybe you'll correct me when you're giving your answer, that when you were working Mondays to Saturdays, you probably didn't have time to, maybe go for confession and all of that thing. So how has it affected your faith now?
So I think it was very stressful for me, and I had to find ways to see how I can incorporate that into that schedule. And what we did, or what I did personally, was I subscribed for YouTube channels on daily masses. So that's something that really helped in the process. I really enjoyed that, and I continued that through the whole pandemic till date. And that's something that I feel like every Catholic should actually try and do. Or if you can't move out during that period, because I wasn't able to move out during that period. So you had to like find some means of getting closer to God. I also noticed that my parents were always calling all the time to check up on me. So I think family is a very huge part of our faith, and that encouraged me to actually do more as a person. So having that daily reminder, hope you went to mass today, hope you did this, was very encouraging, and I think I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Awesome. So let me ask you this. What kinds of people should not even consider being remote workers?
People that are generally disorganized, people that need structure. So there are certain people that they need structure to survive and work. And if there is no structure, they become very lazy and complacent. So there are people that you have to, even in this remote, what we noticed that someone was basically not doing anything and was just relaxed. And that person requires that he has to come to the office. He needs that structure. He needs that, I'm coming to the office, I'm sitting down, I'm pressing my laptop. That's the kind of structure. So those kind of people, you can't do anything about it. You have to make sure that you bring them to the office and create those kind of structures for them so that they can be more productive. At the end of the day, if they are more productive, the business moves forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful discussion, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's episode of the show. All right. Thank you so much, JoseMaria. It has been a very enlightening discussion, but we have to move to Collins now so that he can give us tips and tricks for our faith improvement. Collins, take it away.
Thank you very, very much, Chima. On the last Sunday of the liturgical calendar, we Catholics celebrate the feast of Christ the King. And this was a feast that was designed to give special recognition to the dominion of Christ. But how did that feast come about? Welcome to Know Your Faith series. I am Collins, and today we'll be talking about the feast of Christ the King. So the solemnity of Christ the King was established by Pope Pius XI in 1925 as an antidote to secularism. Now, the feast was intended to proclaim in a striking and effective manner that Christ was the King of all, both heaven and earth. Now, around 1922, it was just briefly after or shortly after the First World War. So the world lacked peace and tranquility. People were looking and turning around to anyone who would give them any atom of hope. So it was at that time that, the tyrants rose up in the disguise of leadership, and people were just following anyone who would give them a sense of belonging. And it got to the point where even Christians and a whole lot of people were losing their way in Christ. So many consider the basics of morality and the teachings of the church to be outdated, as it's a thing of the past. So we shouldn't be, there was no point anymore if there can be a World War II. So what's the whole point of the teachings of the church? So it continued on through the 20th century, and it got to a point where people were not even able to proclaim Christ as their king. They could maybe privately, but out in the public, it was not a thing anymore. So Pope Pius XI saw a need and the development as things were going to put an end to this secular way of living, and decided to propose a feast or a day where we set aside to proclaim to the world that Christ is King. Of course, we know this, and at the time when he proposed it to the bishops and archbishops, some were against it, as we already have, the Epiphany, where we already proclaim that Jesus Christ is king. What's the point again? But about 340 bishops and archbishops wanted it, and it came and it stayed. So the feast was initially to be held at the last Sunday in October, just a week before the feast of All Saints, and 4 weeks prior to the start of Advent. This was placed simply to emphasize that Christ is the king of both those who have gone, the saints in heaven, and also to show that he's still coming again. However, in 1969, Pope Paul VI moved the celebration to the last Sunday of the liturgical calendar, still to prove the point that Christ is still king now, and he will still come again to reign both in heaven and in earth. So if we even check today, peace still eludes us in our society. There's so many things happening all around the world. Things are changing. So there's really no much difference between now and 1922. So that is why we still need to constantly proclaim Christ as our King and personal Lord and Savior. So that is for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and back to you, Chima.
Thank you so much, Collins, for that wonderful episode of Know Your Faith. I hope each and every one of us has picked one or two things from his episode. Now we're going to look at our saint of the week, and that person is no other than Saint Matthew the Apostle. We all know the story of Saint Matthew the Apostle, who was a tax collector before becoming one of Jesus's disciples, and also one of the authors of the Gospels, which we use to understand the person and the life of Jesus. Matthew wrote his Gospel account around 41 and 50 AD. And it was a very important body of work at that time because people were expecting a Messiah to come back and, be a militant because of the way they were being oppressed for their faith. Matthew is often depicted with one of the creatures described in Revelations 4:7. The lion, the human face, and all of that. Matthew is often depicted with one of those creatures. So today, pray to Saint Matthew for the grace to, like him, answer God when he calls. And always remember that his feast day is on the 21st day of September every year. So make sure you venerate him on these days. Thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you so much for listening to our discussion on remote work. Thank you once again, JoseMaria, for your presence. I greatly appreciate it. And I hope you've picked one or two things from our show. Don't forget that this episode will be up on our YouTube channel, Dominican Media Presents. In case you missed any part of the show and you would like to catch up, make sure you stay tuned at 8:30 p.m. when the show will go up. Also, make sure you catch up with past episodes of the show if you want to follow what we've been doing so far. Our discussion continues on social media. Twitter, 7 o'clock every Tuesday, where we have our CFF chat room. And the question for this week is, which has better productivity potential, remote work or a physical office? Tuesday, 7 p.m., CFF chat room. We'll be expecting your responses. Thank you for supporting CFF, and if you want to keep on supporting, you can contact us through the details you can see on your screen or visit our website, dominicanmedia.com.ng. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end of today's show. And until we come your way with another beautiful episode of CFF, keep being saints in jeans and shirts.